all being very tactful and not like laughing during the laughing parts or weeping during the weepy parts. But it was equally moving to be with that kind of an audience because I think they resonated with the film slightly differently than other groups. And their feedback was very useful. You know, a lot of women came to me and said, "We're so glad that you made this because I thought I was the only person who had this." And that was one of the reasons we made it. We knew that that sense of isolation is just as damaging as the symptoms.
My sister is a breast cancer survivor. She was diagnosed when she was 38. Issues, survivor. And a lot of the symptoms they were talking about, she has them, and she keeps thinking that there's something else wrong with her.
Yeah.
She doesn't. I don't think. Well, I didn't know, and she didn't know that these were all ongoing side effects from the chemo.
Yeah. A lot of women think that they have metastatic disease, and it's terrifying. You know, one of the symptoms that we didn't talk about are migraine headaches, and so of course people then think that they have metastases to the brain. The women in our study had a median and mean number of symptoms of 15 discrete symptoms per person, which is extraordinary and really acute symptoms. You know, ranging from stuff like mouth ulcerations that never heal, joint degeneration, vision changes, many of the things that you've heard. Oncologists typically have said, no, these are psychosomatic, they're not part of your treatment, but specialists in these fields will say, oh, I see this all the time with chemotherapy patients. So orthopedists, for example, will say, oh, we see joint degeneration all the time. Of course, it's the chemicals. I talked with my dentist and said, a lot of women in my study have a lot of gum disease subsequent to treatment. Do you ever see that? And he said, oh, we see it all the time. And I said, is it in the literature? He said, no. I think it's complicated. I don't think that there's like, you know, this terrible conspiracy to not tell patients. I think the problem is that we have a finite number of things in our arsenal to address cancer at this time. And so I think doctors are really reluctant to tell patients they might have these ongoing side effects with the fear that maybe people won't get treated. Nobody in our study, no one I've ever spoken with, says, oh, I wish I hadn't had cancer treatment. You don't survive cancer otherwise. But they wish that they had known because the quality of their life is really impaired. And if at least you know, and you know that you're not alone, there is something to that empowerment. I've done some work with the Center for East-West Medicine at UCLA. They combined Eastern medicine with Western medicine. And what we're finding is that typically some of the more holistic approaches can't cure these symptoms, but it can lessen how bad they are. So for example, massage is very helpful with lymphedema. Acupuncture is very good at addressing certain kinds of fatigue. You know, another big problem is that nobody knows who's going to get these symptoms and who isn't. And there are no big cohort, longitudinal, quantitative studies that describe how many people who have had cancer. It's not just breast cancer. People who have other kinds of cancers called our study and reported similar symptoms. But nobody knows for sure how many people have this. There's just no data. We know anecdotally some people get it, but we don't know how many.
One thing wasn't clear, were all of them taking the same medications? Yeah.
All different kinds of treatment protocols, all different physicians, all different combinations. So some had only radiation, some had radiation and chemotherapy, some had only chemotherapy. Well, when I started this project, I was looking, I can't even remember what I searched for, but I was looking for any kind of data about any other condition like this. And the closest that I found was Gulf War syndrome, which kind of makes sense, right? That if in fact people in the Gulf War were exposed to chemicals and to radiation, that they might have similar bundles of symptoms.
What was the median age of the women in your study?
I can't remember off the top of my head, Judy. I think it was 50.
The reason I ask is because one response that I didn't see, which I have seen in young breast cancer survivors, is a very proactive response. And instead of just sitting there and sort of saying, well, you know, I don't want to go to the doctor. I mean, people go to the internet, they look stuff up, they ask their doctors questions, they're, you know, aggressive consumers of medical information. And I don't see that in that movie. Do you think that's a function of age or a function of social context?
I think it's a function of when they were diagnosed and treated. A lot of them are between 10 and 20 years out, and I think things have changed acutely in the last 5 years. That's a very good point. And I do think, I think doctors get really irritated sometimes if you go to their office and you get a little bundle of papers from the internet. On the other hand, it's kind of a great equalizer, right? That you at least can self-inform to the extent that you can have an informed discussion and kind of go toe-to-toe with people who for, you know, so many years have been gatekeepers to information, gatekeepers to treatment. And so that is tremendously empowering. And I would bet if we were to do this study again now, what we'd see a different kind
Yeah,
of
I was just
situation.
wondering that, yeah.
What sort of response have you seen to the film?
Um, by and large, I have seen extremely positive response from people who have seen it. I think cancer survivors who are a certain number of years out are enthusiastic about it and really want to see it. People who have been recently diagnosed don't want to see it. And I can totally understand that. It's too much. There's too much going on. I don't think of this, though, as kind of a depressing film. I do think it's a film of hope. I also don't think it's about breast cancer survivors. I think it's about anybody who endures a chronic condition. And that's kind of a universal experience, right? So, and across, age and across socioeconomic status, people seem to like it. I do think that people who are coming from backgrounds where they really feel like they've had doctors who haven't spoken to them in a way that's respectful or that has really taken into account their own experience, they really like it because finally, you have a whole bunch of women from a variety of different backgrounds. You could tell that even though we only had African American and white women in the sample, they were very diverse across their own spectrums. People like that finally there's something being said about these kinds of conditions.
How do you respond to the men who see it? They've been very
This has been very rewarding. A lot of the men who come to see it will say to us after the film, I really didn't want to come see this film, which I totally understand. If I hadn't made this film, would I want to go see a film on breast cancer survivors? I don't know. And to a person, they have said to us, it was wonderful to see this. I was very moved by it. I just had a man who emailed me after the Baltimore Festival and said, my mother is a survivor. She's an art therapy instructor, and I'd like some copies of your film. I'd like to give it to her and be able to share with other people. So.
I was going to ask about the distribution.
It's me.
So, with funds from the Susan G. Komen Foundation, one of the things we did was we put aside a budget and we made, originally made 500 copies, and I think I've given out about 200. So right now I'm using another 300 copies as furniture in my office. I'm very happy to send it to whomever would benefit from it free of charge. There's no shipping charge either, as long as I have them. After that, I'm not sure what's going to happen. We did approach PBS. I had a connection through a neighbor, it's all word of mouth. And he was extremely enthusiastic and went to his programming director who said, there's a lot of stuff about breast cancer. We're not going to do any more on breast cancer. And so, I had sort of visions of PBS that were dashed. But other people have suggested maybe we should approach Discovery. I don't have those kinds of connections, so I'm trying to make those kinds of connections, and I'm hopeful that maybe one day it gets aired somewhere. But.
I have a very, very small sample of women who are survivors who, just from talking with them, in the few years after they were diagnosed and treated, I just get the sense, and this was just incredibly illuminating and fascinating because I don't think these friends of mine know this, because they're telling me, well, I'm about 80% back, but they can't quite capture what isn't right. And this would be, you almost would hope that this would be available for people to take as they, at some point, during the, at the end, I don't know, at the end of chemotherapy,
Or even through support groups that you could just get from your support group leader and it would be helpful.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I would hope to do. The film has been out now for a year, and these are the two biggest screenings that we've done. We've done one at UCLA when it first came out, and then we were then finalizing the book. So I brought the book. I dropped a copy off at Canada, so if anybody's interested in seeing it, you'll see it there. We have a website for both the film and for the book, and I have some little magical postcards, so if you want my contact information or links to it. So then I focused more on the book than I did on the film stuff, because even just getting into a film festival is like winning the lottery. There are, like everybody and their grandmama can now make a film, which is great, but it also means the competition is difficult. And so just applying takes time and so forth. As I was saying to Mary, the good news and the bad news is I'm soon to be